Picture a southern summer in the early 1930s, hot and slow-paced, with tall magnolia trees shading front porches and a faint hint of honeysuckle in the humid air. Into this setting, in the quiet town of Thomasville, Georgia, on February 27, 1930, came a baby girl destined for Hollywood greatness, Joanne Trimier Woodward. The name itself was a mouthful, derived from her family's Huguenot heritage, but that was only the first of many memorable details about a child who would one day stand among the biggest icons in the film industry. In an era when the movies offered escapism from economic hardships and the threat of war, Joanne's trajectory seemed in hindsight almost predestined. She would go from a small-town girl admiring glamorous stars on screen to becoming one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood, a remarkable transformation that happened through a blend of talent, opportunity, and her own determined spirit. Joanne's parents were Eleanor and Wade Woodward Jr. Her father served at one point as vice president of the publishing company Charles Scribner's Sons, then took on administrative roles in the Thomasville school system. Her mother, Eleanor, was a passionate movie buff who adored cinema so much that Joanne liked to joke she was almost born in the middle of a Joan Crawford picture. That anecdote alone captures the tone of Joanne's early life. While her father favored traditional paths, he fully supported his son's pursuit of architecture. Eleanor saw nothing wrong with encouraging her daughter to chase dreams of stardom. She might even have lived vicariously through Joanne's budding interest in the big screen. The South in those years was a patchwork of genteel customs and close-knit communities, which helped shape Joanne's behavior and personality. She was raised with a certain mannerliness that would never fully leave her, even in the cutthroat world of show business. From an early age, she was curious, slightly mischievous, and utterly mesmerized by movies. Her mother's obsession with film brushed off on her, and together, mother and daughter gushed over the silver screen's biggest names. They particularly admired Laurence Olivier, whose portrayal of Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights left both of them swooning. In a legendary childhood story, 9-year-old Joanne actually hopped into Laurence Olivier's limousine at a movie premiere, plopping herself onto his lap in a bold attempt to meet her hero face to face. Far from being annoyed, Olivier was reportedly amused by her sheer audacity. Later in her career, they would cross paths again, becoming good friends as she ascended from starstruck child to accomplished actress. In second grade, the Woodward family moved to Marietta, Georgia. This new setting did little to dampen Joanne's enthusiasm for acting. If anything, the moves and transitions shaped her adaptability. Just a few years later, her parents divorced, leading to another change of scenery, Greenville, South Carolina. Joanne attended Greenville High School, where she immersed herself in drama club activities, taking on roles in local productions, and quickly becoming known as one of the prettiest and most talented young performers around. In fact, she participated in beauty contests, capturing several titles across Georgia. In an era that appreciated grace, composure, and a friendly face, Joanne's pageant success wasn't surprising. She seemed blessed not only with natural elegance, but also with that intangible star quality that can't be taught. After graduating from Greenville High School in 1947, she headed to Louisiana State University, studying drama under Sanford Meisner's techniques. Meisner, alongside Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg, is widely considered one of the greatest acting teachers America has produced. He placed huge emphasis on authenticity, spontaneity, and emotional honesty, all of which would become hallmarks of Joanne's acting style. But before she could dive into advanced character work, Meisner insisted on tackling one major obstacle, her thick Southern drawl. While it contributed to her charm in real life, it might have limited her early range on screen. The training paid off, though. She learned to adapt her voice so that it could suit myriad roles, rather than pigeonhole her as the Southern belle. Armed with new confidence, she set out to establish herself as a working actress. Television in the 1950s was a rapidly expanding frontier, and Joanne cut her teeth in anthologies and series like Tales of Tomorrow, the Philco Goodyear Television Playhouse, and the Ford Television Theater. This was a time when many big stars were content to stay in film, so live television dramas often offered young or lesser-known actors a fantastic training ground. They performed live, sometimes making mistakes, but always sharpening their instincts. The necessity to memorize entire scripts for a single broadcast-taught discipline, a discipline that would prove invaluable as her career progressed. In these professional circles, one fateful meeting came about courtesy of Joanne's agent, an introduction to a strikingly handsome actor named Paul Newman. Their first impressions of each other were mutual admiration. Newman exclaimed something like, "Geez, what an extraordinarily pretty girl," while Joanne would later admit she was instantly drawn to his looks and magnetism. The two worked together as understudies in the Broadway production of Picnic in 1953, a show in which Newman would later appear in a principal role. Though their personal relationship didn't ignite overnight, the seeds were planted, seeds that would grow into one of Hollywood's most famous and enduring power couples. Joanne's film debut in a significant part came in Count Three and Pray, a post-Civil War Western released in the mid-1950s. She portrayed Lissy, a teenage orphan with a tomboy streak. Critics were impressed by her freshness and authenticity, praising her ability to bring dimension to a role that might otherwise have felt generic. This positive reception garnered attention from the major studios. Before long, she'd signed a contract with 20th Century Fox, a pivotal move that opened doors to bigger projects. Her early career soared further when she appeared in A Kiss Before Dying, 1956. Starring alongside established names like Robert Wagner and Jeffrey Hunter, she confirmed that her presence could stand alongside Hollywood heavyweights. But it was in 1957 that Joanne truly burst into stardom, taking on a remarkable lead role in The Three Faces of Eve. She played a woman diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, simultaneously portraying Eve White, Eve Black, and Jane. The performance was both psychologically intense and stunningly layered. She navigated the personalities with fluidity, turning what could have been a showy gimmick into a nuanced, empathetic portrayal of a woman grappling with mental fragmentation. Critics raved, audiences were intrigued, and awards bodies were impressed. Joanne won the Academy Award for Best Actress, as well as a Golden Globe and a National Board of Review Award. She was also nominated for a BAFTA. This was an astounding triumph, an Oscar for her first major lead, solidifying her reputation as more than just a pretty face. From there, her career seemed to catapult forward. Alongside major stars and increasingly with Paul Newman, she took on roles that showcased her dramatic skill. Off-screen, the chemistry between Joanne and Newman transformed from a slow burn into a profound connection. When they finally married in 1958, just days after Newman's divorce from his first wife became official, Hollywood was abuzz. Newman already had 3 children from his prior marriage, which made their union a blend of youthful romance and very real adult responsibilities. Jackie Witt, Newman's first wife, had been initially reluctant to grant the divorce, but she ultimately realized how unhappy her husband was without Joanne. Once free to marry, the couple wasted no time tying the knot, embarking on what would become a 50-year partnership, truly a rare feat by Hollywood standards. Throughout the 1960s, they collaborated on multiple productions, with Paul often starring and Joanne sometimes receiving top billing as well. She possessed an effortless interplay with him, both romantically and creatively. Their dynamic hit a new plateau when Newman tried his hand at directing. One notable example is Rachel, 1968, his directorial debut, in which Joanne played Rachel, a single sheltered schoolteacher in her mid-30s. The character was shy, unfulfilled, and longing for emotional and romantic awakening. In the hands of a lesser actress, such a character might have seemed pitiful or one-dimensional, but Joanne brought depth, fragility, and subtle longing. Critics hailed it as her finest role to date, and accolades poured in. Another Golden Globe, an Oscar nomination, and widespread industry respect. Paul, too, was praised for his direction, further knitting their reputations together as a formidable creative team. This synergy spilled over into the 1970s, a decade when many Hollywood couples struggled to remain relevant amid cultural shifts in filmmaking. Joanne and Paul, however, found ways to adapt. As she aged, Joanne discovered new kinds of characters she could portray: stronger maternal figures, complex professionals, or flawed but dignified women facing life's curveballs. Newman continued alternating between acting and directing, giving them fresh avenues to explore. They found that their personal bond enriched their professional collaborations, lending authenticity to the stories they told. Outside of film, Joanne expanded her horizons. Her background in stage and live television often led her back to theater work. Eventually, she ventured behind the scenes, directing stage productions and, in time, serving as artistic director for the Westport Country Playhouse from 2008-2001 to 2005. During those years, she strived to maintain the theater's artistic standards while also supporting an environment that nurtured emerging talents. This position mirrored her own philosophy, that acting is an ever-evolving craft requiring study, mentorship, and the occasional risk. She never forgot her own early breaks, be it from a family's encouragement or the timely introduction to influential agents and directors. In 2003, she became executive producer of a television adaptation of Our Town, which starred Newman. The project was a labor of love, reminiscent of their early years in the industry when they both thrived on heartfelt, character-driven narratives. Joanne also lent her voice as a narrator to a few projects, demonstrating that even as her on-screen appearances became less frequent with age, she continued finding ways to contribute creatively. In her personal life, Joanne developed a close friendship with writer Gore Vidal. There was a period when they even lived together in Los Angeles, leading to widespread rumors that they were engaged. She would later clarify that this arrangement acted as a convenient cover for Vidal's homosexual relationships, thereby insulating him from public scrutiny at a time when revelations about one's sexuality could derail a career. Amid these changing personal dynamics, Joanne and Paul's marriage remained a cornerstone. Critics like to say that they were the ultimate Hollywood anomaly, a glamorous couple who never lost sight of each other. They weathered professional disappointments and personal challenges, including raising 3 daughters: Eleanor, known as Nell, Melissa, often called Lissy, and Claire, nicknamed Clea, or sometimes spelled as Claire Olivia, alongside Paul's children from his first marriage. Despite the swirling energies of press, fans, and sometimes malicious gossip, they maintained a grounded home life. They divided their time between California and Connecticut, favoring the latter for its quieter pace and proximity to nature. Over time, their marriage became a symbol of stability, so much so that younger performers admired them as mentors. But Joanne's personal growth didn't end with her on-camera roles or her marriage. In 1988, she and Paul established The Hole in the Walgate camp in Ashford, Connecticut. This nonprofit summer camp offered services to children with terminal or life-altering illnesses, including cancer, a place of respite and fun. It came from a heartfelt desire to give back, using their fame to shine a light on a cause they found deeply meaningful. Beyond financial support, they visited, participated in events, and showed genuine empathy for families navigating some of the most challenging moments of their lives. The camp, still active decades later, stands as part of Joanne's legacy of compassion, a tangible reminder that for all her cinematic achievements, she also strove to leave the world a better place. In 1990, Joanne achieved another personal milestone by completing her degree at Sarah Lawrence College. The process spanned nearly 10 years, illustrating her determination to finish what she'd begun in her youth. This accomplishment underscores a core element of who she is, a lifelong learner who never stopped investing in her intellectual growth, even when she was already recognized as one of the greats in her field. Tragedy, however, knocked on their door in 2008 when Paul passed away from lung cancer. They had been married for 50 years, a golden anniversary rarely reached in Hollywood circles. The outpouring of sympathy from fans and colleagues was enormous. The media offered tribute after tribute, praising Newman's charitable work, his storied career, and his iconic partnership with Joanne. For her part, Joanne withdrew from the limelight, mourning the companion who had been by her side through so many transformations. She settled in Westport, Connecticut, the place where they had built a life away from glitz and flash. In reflecting on Joanne Woodward's career, certain words inevitably come to mind: versatile, genuine, unpretentious. Few actresses can boast an Oscar for their first leading role, nor can they claim a half-century marriage in the swirl of show business. From her earliest days in Thomasville to her storied decades in Hollywood, she remained grounded, never letting fame erode her essential warmth. She approached acting as a craft, a discipline she respected, honed, and continued exploring through her older age. Even in her 70s and beyond, she kept learning and teaching, ensuring that younger generations benefited from her experiences. Critics often celebrate the love story between Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman, or they reminisce about her skill in The Three Faces of Eve, but there's far more to her narrative. She was a beauty pageant winner who transcended superficial glamour, shifting into psychologically deep roles that many of her peers couldn't have executed half as well. She was also a cultural bridge, someone who started in an era when studios basically owned performers, then adapted to independent cinema's rise, the changing technologies of television, and eventually the world of digital media. That she thrived in each era speaks to her adaptability and her passion. One aspect of Joanne's persona that resonates with fans is her humility. She has repeatedly talked about feeling lucky, about how timing and opportunities played a part in her success. Yet those who worked with her insist that talent and grit were the real driving forces. Whether taking direction from a first-time filmmaker or working under the watchful eye of her own husband, she stayed committed to the story and the emotion at its core. That unwavering focus is part of why her best performances remain timeless, even when viewed through the lens of modern moviegoers more accustomed to fast-paced, big-budget features. For younger film lovers who haven't explored her work, discovering Joanne Woodward can be a revelation. The Three Faces of Eve might top the recommendation list, but Rachel is a strong contender as well if one wants to understand the emotional nuance she brings to a role. In both, you see an actress unafraid to tackle complicated feelings, unafraid of looking less than glamorous if it serves the story. Watch her in those moments of raw vulnerability, and you witness a performer who can speak volumes with the simplest facial expressions. As time went on, directing and mentoring became a larger part of her life. She once expressed that helping others discover or refine their talent was as fulfilling as receiving accolades for her own performances. The Westport Country Playhouse chapter is telling. Under her artistic directorship, she focused on staging classics and new works, bridging tradition with fresh creative voices. Many aspiring actors, writers, and directors who passed through that venue have praised Joanne for her kindness and constructive guidance, describing her as the kind of leader who never forgot her own humble beginnings. In personal anecdotes, colleagues recall how she often downplayed her star status. She was approachable, thoughtful, and pragmatic. If someone sought advice, she'd give it openly. If a scene partner was nervous, she'd help calm them down with a mix of playful banter and professional reassurance. Some even say that, in a business that fosters rivalry, Joanne was a rare confidant to multiple actresses. Her friendship with the likes of Alice and Janney, whom she mentored, underscores her readiness to pass the torch. Time after time, her name comes up in stories told by younger performers who credit her for teaching them about balance, staying human and kind in an industry that can easily lead to self-obsession. Looking back on her life, it's fitting to remember that she started as a starstruck child, entranced by the glamour of silver screen idols. Yet from that starry-eyed vantage point, she matured into a figure who brought new layers of artistry to the craft itself. Her accolades, from Oscars to Golden Globes to BAFTA nods, reflect external validation, but perhaps the real achievement is how she inspired colleagues and fans. It's one thing to win a trophy, it's another to sustain a 50-year marriage, nurture a loving family, build a charitable foundation for children with life-threatening illnesses, and still keep your creative spark alive. That's precisely the path Joanne walked. When she revisited higher education, spending roughly a decade to finish her degree at Sarah Lawrence, she showed that learning is never a closed book. Her final diploma arrived well after she'd already won some of Hollywood's most prestigious awards. It was never about short-term glory, but about personal enrichment. This theme threads through her life story. The depth of her devotion, whether it was to a role, a relationship, or a cause, always ran deeper than appearances. She projected an elegance that wasn't manufactured, a grace that came from a genuine interest in people and narratives. In interviews, she has spoken about her father's initial skepticism regarding her ambitions, contrasting with her mother's near fanatical embrace of film culture. This tug-of-war shaped her in ways both challenging and thrilling. She once joked that her father would have preferred her to take the path of an architect like her brother, a safe, respectable profession. Instead, she ventured into the unpredictable, sometimes chaotic realm of performance. And while success wasn't guaranteed, she used every ounce of drive and every skill gleaned from teachers like Sanford Meisner to carve out a place for herself. The obstacles, like dropping her thick accent, might have sidelined a less determined person, but she took them on methodically, piece by piece. By the time stardom arrived, she had already crafted her identity as a thoughtful and deliberate artist. Anyone searching for a blueprint on how to navigate Hollywood's pitfalls, fickle fame, persistent gossip, the strains placed on personal relationships, could do well to examine Joanne Woodward's story. She married one of the most sought-after men in the industry, endured the scrutiny of tabloids that tried to fan rumors about their private lives, and still managed to maintain a sense of dignity and genuine affection for fans. The couple's philanthropic efforts, from the Hole in the Wall Gang camp to the various other charitable involvements, displayed a heartfelt approach to celebrity. They believed in leveraging their spotlight to bring hope to the people who needed it the most. For those who were around during her heyday, Joanne Woodward epitomized the best of Hollywood: skill, grace, and moral grounding. For younger generations, discovering her is like stumbling upon a gem from another era, one that still sparkles as brightly now as it did decades ago. Perhaps that's because her performances remain deeply human. When she portrayed multiple identities in The Three Faces of Eve, audiences connected not just with a flashy technique, but with an undercurrent of empathy. When she brought Rachel to life in Rachel, Rachel, it felt personal, as if she were channeling a real person's innermost yearnings. And in later endeavors, be it producing, directing, or lending her voice as a narrator, she never lost that human touch. When Paul Newman passed away, tributes poured in from around the world, praising him as a philanthropist, an Oscar-winning actor, and, of course, half of one of the industry's most celebrated marriages. Hidden behind those accolades was a portrait of Joanne as well. She was an integral part of his journey and a major reason for the philanthropic initiatives they took on together. The heartbreak she endured in losing her life partner was immense, but their story left behind a hopeful reminder. It's possible to find a true soulmate in a place as notoriously tumultuous as Hollywood. Their bond was tested by time, by public pressures, by the demands of raising children, and by each of their significant careers, yet it held strong. Today, Joanne remains in Westport, Connecticut, living out her later years in peaceful retirement. She's chosen a quiet life away from the cameras that once defined her. And while fans might wish for her to appear again on screen or in interviews, there's also a respect for her desire to cherish memories and family without the glare of spotlights. The daughters she and Paul raised have gone on to pursue their own endeavors, each carrying forward lessons learned from parents who knew how to balance success and kindness.